There's no question, is it? Which is the best tyre in the world, period? Goodyear. I mean, I wouldn't have any other tyre on a motor car, even on the street.
Nigel Mansell trusts his life to Goodyear. In over 180 Grand Prix, he's raced on nothing else. By the end of 1992, Goodyear had won 279 Grand Prix, 20 Drivers' Championships and 21 Constructors' titles to make the company the most successful tyre supplier in Formula One. Supplying the entire Formula One field is a mammoth undertaking. To each of the 16 races across 5 continents, Goodyear transported more than 2,000 tyres, supported by an army of engineers and technical staff. And in 1992, after 3 near misses, Nigel Mansell, with Goodyear, would finally seize that most treasured prize, the World Drivers' Championship. For Mansell, it was a dream no more. 12 years of success and disappointment in Formula One had led to this point. Mansell was in peak form. Alongside him, Riccardo Patrese, his Williams teammate, the most experienced man in Grand Prix racing. Reigning world champions Ayrton Senna and McLaren Honda were reunited for the 5th consecutive season, and with them, Gerhard Berger. Ferrari teamed experienced Ivan Capelli with Mercurial Jean Alesi, while at Benetton, Martin Brundle joined forces with Michael Schumacher. The 1992 season opened at the newly rebuilt Kyalami circuit in South Africa. Nigel Mansell, who'd won the last Grand Prix here for Williams in 1985, seized pole position. But as the lights turned green, it was his teammate Riccardo Patrese who surged from 4th to 2nd. Senna, in 3rd, could only sit and watch as the Williams disappeared. Mansell's 1992 success story began almost 2 years before, when Williams developed their sophisticated electronics control package. While Mansell's 1991 hopes were ruined by its unreliability, the system was to pay off in 1992. In South Africa, nothing could catch the Renault V10-powered FW14B. Mansell and Patrese destroyed the opposition. The engineers had clearly done their job. Now it was up to the drivers. The second race of the year underlined the Williams dominance. Mansell and Patrese starting 1st and 2nd. A start line shunt eliminated Ivan Capelli's Ferrari. The Italian season already off to a wretched start and destined to get little better. Behind the Williams duo, the McLarens and Benettons battled hard for points. While Senna was sidelined with transmission failure, Michael Schumacher raced on to 3rd in what was remarkably only his 7th Grand Prix. For Mansell, the season could hardly have started better. 2 races, 2 pole positions and 2 wins. The Williams was working superbly and Nigel was in buoyant mood. In Brazil, the 3rd race of the year, Mansell again took pole, but this time it was Riccardo Patrese's Williams that led into the 1st corner. Senna busy fighting off the Benettons. Mansell decided that enough was enough and took the lead. Senna was fighting a losing battle, surrendering 4th to Alesi's Ferrari before retiring once more. But Schumacher was superb, taking 3rd in his Benetton. Despite their stops for new tyres, the Williams had lapped the entire field by the time the checkered flag came out. Patrese again runner-up to Mansell in another dominant Williams 1-2. The pattern for 1992 was beginning to take shape. By way of a change, the 4th race of the year offered rain. Michael Schumacher's Benetton was 2nd on the grid, but Patrese outdragged him as the lights changed. By far the best start, though, came from Jean Alesi. From 8th on the grid, he was 3rd in his Ferrari at the first corner. But Michael Schumacher was too good for Alesi's Ferrari with a magnificent move past the Frenchman. Berger was lining up to do the same when the pair touched. Using all his engine's power, Alesi kept the car on the road and rejoined the race, but he'd ruined his tyres. Into the pits and a quick stop for new rubber before returning to the fray. In the foul conditions, Alesi was simply outstanding. He reeled in Berger at a fantastic rate and then passed him. Senna crashed out under pressure from the Ferrari, leaving Alesi 3rd. Mansell, meanwhile, equalled Senna's record of 4 wins in the first 4 races of the season. Despite his heroic efforts, Alesi had just failed to catch Schumacher's second-place Benetton and settled for a well-deserved 3rd. As the lights went green at Imola, Nigel Mansell once again took off into a race of his own, leaving the field and teammate Riccardo Patrese behind at a fantastic rate in the early laps, pushing the car as hard as he dared. Benetton fortunes were reversed, Schumacher spinning out while Brundle would race on to 4th. With a comfortable lead, Mansell stopped early for new tyres, taking no chances with a leisurely pit stop. After his change, Senna rejoined behind Alesi's Ferrari. Jean held off the McLaren, intending to go through non-stop, but finally Senna made a daring move. Berger tried to follow Senna through as Alesi tried to defend his position and failed. Out front, Mansell was comfortably in charge once more. Behind Patrese, Senna took 3rd, only his 2nd points finish of the year. Mansell took the flag with Patrese close behind. The 4th Williams 1-2 in 5 races and another record for Mansell, his 5th consecutive win at the beginning of the season. Every driver wants to win his home Grand Prix and Monaco. Nigel Mansell's always gone well here, but he'd only finished in the points twice in 11 visits. Perhaps 1992 would be different. Certainly at the start it seemed so. From a dominant pole position, he took the lead. Senna chased as hard as he could in 2nd, but was dropping back all the time. Close behind were young charges Schumacher and Alesi, battling behind Riccardo Patrese. While Alesi retired shortly after they collided, Schumacher would carry on to finish 4th. Mansell dominated for 70 laps until suddenly he was in the pits with a loose wheel nut, and now the race came alive. 7 laps to go and the fastest car chasing the winner at Monaco for the past 3 years. Mansell was electrifying, ringing out of the Williams all it had to give and more. It seemed inevitable he'd pass Senna. But this was vintage Senna. Everywhere Mansell looked, Senna had covered. Nigel tried everything he knew, but to no avail. Another famous victory for Senna at Monaco. At the start, he knew only luck would enable him to win, and he seized it with both hands. But at the next race in Canada, it very nearly happened again. With a much improved Honda V12 and a superb qualifying achievement, Senna lined up on pole, until now Mansell's sole preserve. And at the start, he outdragged the Williams, traction control system and all. For 14 laps, Senna led, the 11 drivers behind having to bide their time. Except Mansell. The Williams was out of the race. So too was Senna at half distance, with gearbox failure handing the lead to Berger. A broken gearbox put Patrese out too. This was the first time there hadn't been at least one Williams in the points for 20 races. Victory was Berger's. Long overshadowed at McLaren by Senna, he'd qualified and raced superbly for a well-deserved win. After another fantastic battle, Schumacher and Alesi finished second and third. In France, as at Imola, Patrese made a better start than Mansell, this time holding his lead. Senna and Schumacher tangled at the first corner, causing mayhem that decimated the field. Patrese was in determined mood. Mansell would not pass. A battle royal between the Williams pair seemed on the cards, despite the arrival of light rain. As the rain increased, red flags were shown to stop the race. But by the restart, the drivers were all on slick tires again as the track had dried. Mansell took over from Patrese at the head of the field at the end of lap 1 and immediately started building a commanding lead. The Williams cruised to a dominant 1-2 finish, the perfect result at Renault's home Grand Prix. Mansell and Patrese joined on the podium by Brundle, taking third for Benetton. Of the 32 drivers who arrived at Silverstone, only one really expected to win. Mansell reckons his home crowd support to be worth 2 seconds a lap, and the others were all resigned to another crushing victory for Red 5, despite which Patrese drew ahead through the first corner. But Mansell decided that a few hundred yards in second was quite enough and swept past. To the ecstatic delight of the crowd, Nigel opened up a huge lead, while Senna and Brundle relived their old Formula 3 battles, Brundle holding off the world champion, who later retired with transmission failure. That the British Grand Prix would be Mansell's was never really doubted by his fans, and their hero didn't let them down, winning in dominant fashion. The fans' euphoria swept them onto the track as Nigel crossed the line. Oblivious to the dangers, they wanted to salute their hero, who they now firmly believed would be the next world champion. For Mansell, this was the high point of his year. 2 weeks later, Patrese once again got the better start to head Mansell. But as at Silverstone, Nigel was back in front before the end of lap 1. Behind the Williams came Senna and Berger, Schumacher and Brundle, Alesi and Capelli, in team order. Mansell's dramas began on lap 14 when a warning light came on in his cockpit. Mindful of the long period spent at full throttle at Hockenheim, he pitted right away and rejoined in third place. Ahead was Senna. For 5 laps, Mansell was glued to the McLaren's gearbox until finally Senna had had enough and waved him past. At the end of the lap, Mansell led again as Patrese made his stop. The Italian rejoined behind Schumacher, but at his home track, Michael fought like a tiger for third place. For Patrese, catching Senna was easier than passing him. For 7 laps, Ayrton held him off, but on the last lap, Ricciardo tried again. Braking on the dusty track off the racing line, he lost control and with it went a points finish. Senna took second behind Mansell and Germany's hero Schumacher was third in his first home Grand Prix. Hungary, the 11th of the 16-race series, was perhaps the strangest of Nigel Mansell's year, for he didn't lead a lap. Patrese once more got the better start, Mansell dropping back to 4th. After 8 laps, Mansell found a way past Berger, but he was still worried. He needed to finish second or better to win the championship here, yet he was bottled up behind Senna in third. As Nigel knows, to get past Ayrton you need his help, and Senna wasn't going to give up second. Maybe the title would have to wait. Until, that is, the moment when Ricciardo lost concentration. Over halfway through the race, under no pressure, he let the Williams get away from him. He rejoined 7th, but engine failure robbed him even of that. Mansell now settled for a comfortable second until an electronics problem incorrectly caused worries about a possible puncture. In he came for new tyres, rejoining 6th with 16 laps left. Schumacher's spectacular departure helped as his rear wing flew off at over 180 miles an hour. As Senna cruised to victory, Mansell brilliantly picked off Häkkinen, Brundle and Berger to regain second place, enough to clinch the 1992 World Championship. But it was only on the rostrum that Nigel was finally convinced that the championship was his. And as he savoured his moment, all the emotion of years of effort flooded over him. With the title sewn up, Mansell arrived in Belgium ready to win. But McLaren's new traction control system helped Senna seize the lead at the first corner. But Berger had transmission problems. It locked solid. For the opening laps, Mansell was almost running over Senna in his impatience to get past. Such was the speed advantage of the Williams. Senna battled doggedly with the heavy McLaren to hold Nigel off. But soon Nigel was past, running in clean air as light rain began to fall. Patrese too found a way past Senna. At the end of the lap, Mansell dived into the pits to change to wet weather tyres, followed by Alesi in the Ferrari. Mansell rejoined 16th as the rest of the leading group pitted. Schumacher's Benetton was in next, followed by teammate Brundle. All the others had now changed onto wet weather rubber, but what about Senna? Ayrton stayed out on slicks in spite of the wet track. Even when Nigel Mansell passed him, he didn't change. As it was, the gamble failed, and he suffered the worst of both worlds. Forced in by heavier rain, he emerged on wets just as the track started drying. But if the tyre changes hindered Senna, they certainly helped Schumacher. Running wide and just missing a barrier, he realised his wets were too blistered to grip the dry track, and it was time for slicks. This was the turning point of the race, for as Schumacher rejoined on his new slick tyres, everyone else dived into the pits to change. As they did so, Michael drove the wheels off his Benetton to build a lead even Mansell could do nothing about, taking his first Grand Prix victory at the circuit where a year earlier he'd made his Formula One debut. Mansell resumed normal service at Monza, jumping into the lead of the Italian Grand Prix from pole position. Alesi's fast-starting Ferrari was pushed down to third by Senna, Patrese temporarily fourth. Once past Alesi, Ricciardo used the power of the Renault V10 to slingshot past Senna and outbrake him for second. Then, suddenly, Patrese led. Before the race, Mansell had offered to help his teammate win his home Grand Prix, and he now slowed down to let Ricciardo take the lead. But then, Mansell slowed again. This time, a hydraulic pump failure had crippled his car, and he was out of the race. Now, Patrese's hopes of winning his first Italian Grand Prix in 16 attempts were cruelly dashed after an identical failure to Mansell. Senna shot by with 5 laps to go. His car's nose raised and locked in 4th gear, Patrese struggled on to take 4th. He was heartbroken. For Senna, though, a third victory, delighting the man who never gives up. And the Benettons excelled again, finishing second and third. In Portugal, high drama again surrounded Riccardo Patrese. As the lights changed, he made his customary superb start to head Mansell, but the Englishman had the better line and slipped ahead. As Mansell led, Patrese fought off the McLarens of Senna and Berger. The Williams pit stops weren't quick, and though Mansell rejoined with a slim lead, Patrese had both McLarens ahead of him. It looked like being a long afternoon. The McLaren Hondas were very thirsty, carrying a lot of fuel and using their tyres harder. So, at the end of lap 43, Berger needed another pit stop. Out of the last corner, he moved towards the pit entry, slowing just as Patrese accelerated. Amazingly, despite this horrific collision, Patrese was completely unhurt. After that, Mansell's comfortable win went almost unnoticed. Such was the relief that the much-liked Italian had escaped injury. For Mansell then, another record, his 9th win of the season. Senna raced on to second, and Berger, despite the earlier accident, took third. In Japan, Mansell decided he'd try to give Patrese the win he'd missed in Italy. The McLarens were no challenge at Suzuka. Heavy on fuel and tyres, they were unlikely to get close to the Williams. Mansell reckoned he could dictate the race as he liked. Senna retired early while the Williams pair disappeared. And for much of the race, Mansell seemed to be heading comfortably for win number 10. Suddenly, Patrese was ahead. Nigel had slowed, then picked up speed again as his teammate passed, just as he had in Italy. But Mansell was not to finish. He was out of the race with a spectacular engine fire. Berger's McLaren lasted the distance to take second, while Brundle was third in his Benetton. Patrese cruised to a well-deserved victory. The checkered flag finally waved for him at the penultimate race of the season, and Riccardo savoured his taste of success. Mansell and Senna squared up again in Australia, the final Grand Prix, providing some of the best racing of the season. At the end of term street racing bonanza, the McLaren wouldn't be at such a disadvantage, and Senna was determined to end the year on a high. As the leaders got away cleanly, the midfield runners found the tight confines of the Adelaide track a little too close for comfort. For 18 laps, Senna aggressively took the battle to Mansell, attacking all the way. His McLaren almost a match for the Williams for the first time. Using every trick in the book, he stayed latched onto Mansell's gearbox. Behind this titanic Williams-McLaren contest for the lead, Patrese and Berger fought an identical battle for third and fourth. But Mansell and Senna's race ended on lap 19 as they tangled at the hairpin. Berger couldn't find a way to stay ahead of new leader Patrese until two-thirds distance, when the Williams fuel pressure died. Now Schumacher came into the frame, chasing hard as Berger slowed to make sure he'd have enough fuel to finish. The young German brilliantly exploited the nimble Benetton's handling, scything into the Austrian's 22-second lead, head down and charging with the whiff of victory in his nostrils. But Berger squeaked home a scant second ahead of the storming Benetton, Brundle taking third. Though the race was Berger's, the year belonged to Mansell and Williams. Nigel had driven better than ever before, and the Williams had been supreme. perfect too had been Mansell's Goodyear tyres.
You know, there's not many people that can boast that they've won all their races on Goodyear tyres, and I'm very proud to say that I have.
Well, now, having achieved the pinnacle of Formula One, world champion, you're moving on to new fields of endeavour. You're racing in America, in IndyCar racing. Is it going to still be with Goodyear?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, I have so much sort of faith and so much encouragement and support from Goodyear. I wouldn't entertain going into that formula or sport without having the confidence of knowing that when I'm going down the straight at Indianapolis at 240 or 250 miles an hour, I'm on Goodyear Eagle tyres.